Direct Connection is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you. Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for Direct Connection. The Washington Metro system has been having more than its share of troubles. Ridership is down and safety problems are up. Our guest tonight is the system's new general manager, Paul Wiedefeld. Paul, thanks for being with us.
Sure. How are you, Jeff?
The big questions here are what's wrong with Metro and how did it get to be this way on a relatively young mass transit system?
Sure. There's a number of things that have gotten us to where we are today. One is it is 40 years old, which is at the stage where it needs a lot of maintenance. And to be frank, that maintenance was deferred for years, and it's catching up with us. So that's part of the issue. The other issue is we're a two-track system. So unlike other systems that you see around the country, all of our maintenance has to occur in effect either during service hours or non-service hours. And historically, we've done them during non-service hours, and that's a very small window. You could do that when it's new and you keep up, but as the system has aged, you couldn't keep up. And so those factors have just led us to this condition we're in right now.
So you had the emergency stand down where there was no service one day and some electrical connections were all checked out. Last week you announced a new plan, which is a year of service reductions. What needs to happen in that year?
Sure. What we need to do, we call the term we use is state of good repair, but basically it's getting it back to the maintenance level so we can just maintain it on a daily, on an annual basis. We're just not there. To give you one example, with that plan I just announced, we have to replace 48,000 wooden ties. Once we get that done, we will then replace 11,000 per year. So that's how far behind we are. And to do that, literally you're rebuilding the whole rail bed.
Well, let me jump in for a second. Are wooden ties, or like the old clickety-clack railroad, Amtrak, it's all concrete ties. Is it that big is that a crisis, wooden ties?
Oh yeah, our system's actually two systems in one. It's an urban system, and then it's almost like a commuter rail system in one, when you think of the distances. So in the urban core, it's on a floating concrete slab. So that is concrete, but 50% of it's underground. About 40% of it is at grade, and there it is, the wooden ties. And literally they get to a stage where, and it happens with newer ties as well, but sparks hit them, they can actually start to smolder. So the big issue is, as they start to deteriorate, they're holding the track in place like this. So, if you don't get those, then that track starts to move, and then you have other issues, obviously.
What's the biggest worry at this point? I mean, what is it that's been catching on fire?
It's a combination of things. We've had some what we call jumper cables. Those were that was the big issue. Because if a jumper cable catches, and what that is the third rail's running the power. And then there's gaps in that, and that's gaps for where if there's an exit place, for instance. So there's, maybe a 70-foot, 80-foot gap, and you run these four major cables that connect the power from one end of the third rail to the other, and then they connect. But if they get, they're insulated. But if anything happens to that, all that power is then trying to get out. And that's what we had, unfortunately, with the event we had in last January, where the poor woman died, and that was the result of that. It sparked, it caught fire, the smoke from the actual insulation of the cable. So that's the biggest one. The insulators, every 10 feet, you have either an old porcelain or a ceramic insulator that literally holds the third rail in place. So again, power's always trying to find, a path, and if they get dirty, and you get brake dust, you get the dust from the steel wheels that clings to things. You get some moisture in there, and it's a bad recipe.
Let me remind our viewers, if you have a question for the head of the Washington Metro system, give us a call. We'll have the number on the screen. You can also tweet your questions. The Twitter address is @MPTNews. Does Metro have a credibility problem? I mean, it used to be the malfunctions where the escalators were always out, and everybody grumbled about that. And now the malfunctions are more serious. As you mentioned, we had a fatality, we have fires, we have major disruptions. And it maybe isn't clear to the public. You're new, but is anybody else new?
My team is, I've got some, in fact, I had a new safety officer start today. So there are new people there. The board is changing over as well. But to get to your core question, I think there has been a loss of credibility in our ability to deliver the system, the way it should be delivered. It evolved over time. It's not, I don't think you can point to one person or anything of that sort. I think it's a combination of factors that we talked about over decades. But we're at a state now where the conditions are at such a state that they can no longer be ignored. It just cannot be kicked down the road any further.
Let's grab a phone call. Montgomery County, this is Jack. Jack, thank you for the call. Go ahead. Jack, are you there? Last call for Jack.
Yes.
Yes, sir. You're on.
Yes. My question is simply, if these major maintenances had to be made, why were they not planned, and why were they not financed and with a reserve on a timely basis?
Great question. So it's as if nobody knew any of this stuff would ever need to be done.
No, it had been talked about for a few years. We're a very unique system of major rail systems in the country in that we don't have a dedicated funding source. So the fund comes from, basically it comes from two sources. It comes from the fare box, or it comes from local revenues. So the fare box is the fare box, and that drives some of our pricing. But on the local side, you're competing against different, in the case of the district and the Commonwealth, other general fund needs. In Maryland, because of the way that they're funded, you're competing against highway, port, airport, motor vehicle, and other transit. So each, because of the unique nature, again, of the three jurisdictions being part of this, I think that all led to it. So the focus was more on the day-to-day operations and making sure that service was out there, but not as much on the focus. As you know, maintenance are big numbers, and they don't get you a whole lot, right? They're just the basic stuff. There's not a whole lot of ribbon cutting for that.
In connection with that, you also have this setup where there's basically four separate lines of authority. There's Maryland, D.C., Virginia, and the federal government all have seats on the board that governs the operation, hires you. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where if everybody's in charge, is nobody in charge?
I think what it does is it gravitates towards the the common denominator, which is dollars. The way that I think about this system, it is a regional tool in the global competition that the Washington region is in, and because of those other pressures, sometimes it isn't thought that way.
In terms of the money, is there a way to benchmark it to other systems? I mean, there's other systems, San Francisco Bay Area, similar age, it's different, but can you look at it and say they've got way more maintenance money than we do?
I haven't done that. I'm sure you could do it. I think the issue, again, I think it's both the dedicated nature of the dollars. So again, you're not competing against all these other interests. There's a commitment. Okay, we're going to fund this thing on a regional level because it's a regional good, and then I think you start to make decisions a little differently with that. And I think that would have led to some other decisions along the way.
Here's a Twitter question related to the fare box side of the funding. Why are we constantly charged peak fares for slow, inconsistent service? And the peak fares can be pretty big, especially when you compare it to the New York City subway.
Sure. No. We are. We're from a fare perspective, we are high compared to other properties. And again, it gets back to the core where we get the dollars. The only other place to get it is from the local jurisdictions. So it's either coming out of the tax base there, or it's coming from the riders. And that's, there was a decision made years ago that you're going to pay for the prime service at the prime time, and also for distance. And that's there's logic to both of those, and that's what it's based on. But at the end of the day, it can only come from those two sources.
Let's take another call. Washington, D.C. This is Carl. Carl, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Yes. I just want to say, Mr. Wiedefeld, that I'm glad finally that someone is going to take responsibility for doing the job that needs to be done, that should have been done 20 years ago. And I hope that you will next attack the whole funding operation. But the question that I had, which is sort of a technical question, is why are we using wood ties instead of concrete ties when in all over Europe you see concrete ties even on high-speed trains?
Carl, thanks very much. When you replace the ties, you're putting in wood or concrete?
Wood and where these are. Again, it would be another expense if you're going to rebuild it in a different structure. Basically, it was designed with that in mind. Now we do have them in the underground areas. That's what they are on, is concrete ties there. Then we have elevated structure. We have about 10% of the systems on elevator, and that's concrete as well.
The other criticism you hear is that the culture is not safety first. You've been there 6 months. I mean, what have you seen? And if that's the case, big organization, a lot of people who work there for a very long time. How do you move it?
Right. I think it is the case. I think it's evolved again over time, and the way you move that, in my estimation, is one of the things I found when I got there is a very stark disconnect between the line management and the managers. There's about 650 plus managers, and then there's roughly 12,000 other employees. And there, we just haven't had that connection where we're together and moving in the same direction. It's a big emphasis of mine. It was a big emphasis of mine at BWI when I ran BWI as well, because at the end of the day, they are the people, the mechanics, the train operators, the station managers, the bus operators. They're the people that are dealing with, the product to the customer, and we have to get them to be part of that, and that's where safety really starts. It's not signs on the posters on the walls. It's really getting them to understand if they see an issue, they can deal with it, that they're not going to be penalized in any way, and that's got to be their focus. And it starts with me to get that across to them. This is the way that we're going to manage, and that is what I've been working on very hard.
A lot of phone calls for Paul Wiedefeld, the general manager of the Washington Metro System. Let's go out to Montgomery County. This is Bert. Bert, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Hello. I want to thank you for being a champion for safety. And actually, the moderator just asked you the question that I was going to ask you, and that is, how are you dealing with some of the natural resistance that comes when you come in and insist on these sweeping safety changes?
Great. Thank you, Bert. And, I mean, has anybody gotten fired, moved out?
People have moved along already. Just earlier this week, last week now, I sent out a letter to all the managers that are at will, and just to tell them what my priorities are and what I expect from myself and what I expect from them, which is accountability. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, $3 billion a year, moving 1.2 million people a day. So to me, that's extremely exciting, but it means we have a heck of a lot of responsibility. So I want them to understand that. I want them to have that excitement about it, but they also have to understand that they have to perform, and they have to understand what I'm trying to get to. And so tomorrow I'm having, I think it's the first meeting in the history of the organization, where I'm having all 650 of us, actually in Montgomery County, at a very nice concert hall, and where we can get them all together. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, again, where I'm coming from. I need to hear from them, some of their issues. But again, I can't. This is not a one-person job, so I need all of them. I need the 12,000 plus line employees to be together, and so that I'm coming at it from all different angles to get there.
Charles County. This is Mike. Mike, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Wiedefeld, if the only source of funding was the fares, the fare box, just how much would the fares increase?
Great question. Thank you. So what percentage comes from the fare box?
Right. It varies, but on the rail side, fare box recovers almost, I think it's north of 50%. It is. I know it is north of 50%. So that's extremely strong. The MTA, it's probably in the 20s.
The Maryland MTA.
Yeah, the Maryland MTA. So that's extremely strong. So you can imagine doubling that, in effect, then, if you just did that math that way. But also remember, it's not just rail that we run. We run a bus system, and we run what's Metro Access for people with disabilities.
Dorchester County, where the Metro does not go. Ray is on the line. Ray, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Yes, my question is about the whole system and the scheme. Have you considered a decentralized system instead of the centralized system that has failed or has created a lot of inherent problems. And by decentralization, it gives you much more flexibility in addition to what we call high assurance systems engineering.
Ray, if I can interrupt for a second, are you talking about decentralizing the management structure or the actual rail network?
Trains themselves.
Okay.
See, everything is centralized, which they're having a hard time managing.
Okay, thanks very much. Not going to fix that one.
No, I mean, it is a regional system, and I think, the nature of that demands that, literally you look at the travel patterns, it's all over the region. And I think to decentralize that would to introduce transfers for people and everything else. I haven't considered that, to be honest with you.
So what would you say to riders? That if you come in from a Maryland standpoint, you're on the red line, the green line, the orange, the blue, you're going to have some disruptions over the next year. How do you explain that to people?
The way that
they pay a lot of money.
They do. But my job, first and foremost, is to make sure they're safe. So I'm not going to risk that. And it's very clear that we cannot be applying, the convenience over the safety of the people. So I understand sometimes it may be inconvenient as we tackle these things, but at the end of the day, it has to be safe, and we cannot catch up on the reliability without getting in there and doing the work. So I totally understand, what I'm calling for. But my estimation, there's no other way to get there, and the sooner we do it, the better. Basically, what I've done is I've shrunk 3 years worth of work into 1 year with this plan to get us there quicker. The reality is that saves us money. We can be much more productive. Again, we're closed from midnight to 5 a.m. on a weekday. It takes us about an hour and a half to set up and an hour and a half to tear down as we do any work out on the track. So you're getting about 2 hours of productive work. That is just not efficient at all. So the plan here is you start a segment of project. It may go for days, it may go for weeks, but you're done. And you set up once and you tear down once. So that's the theory behind it, and I think it'll work.
There was in the one-day emergency shutdown, there was something said by someone who wasn't you that kind of raised the suspicion that it was a safety decision, but at the same time, Metro wasn't unhappy to be focusing attention on the problem. There was a little bit of a cry for help, and the suspicion in some quarters was that not that the shutdowns are punitive, but that they're intended to cause enough disruption to get people upset, to call their legislators to get you more money.
Yeah, I've heard that. I mean, people have said that, I'm not that smart, but it's not. That had nothing to do with it. It never crossed my mind. We had an incident early in the morning, and literally we worked it all day trying to figure it out. And that night, I pulled in, the senior team, and I asked them point blank. I asked them a lot of hard questions, and I laid it out. I said, look, get me off the ledge here because I'm ready to shut this thing down. I need the answers to these questions. And it wasn't like they were holding back. They just didn't know the answer to some things. And with that, I just could not, I just wouldn't be able to sleep going forward. And that was the decision. All the, afterwards, people started to draw all kinds of dots, or connect all types of dots, and that was never even raised. It was never an issue for me.
Let's talk to Jim in Anne Arundel County. Jim, thanks for the call. Go ahead. Jim, are you there?
So I'm a regular Metro rider, and I used to get Metro alerts on my phone, and I was a blue and orange rider, but I noticed that a lot of the problems that were cropping up were on the red line, and it seemed to me like that all those errors on the red line, and then all of a sudden there was a big cataclysmic accident on the red line. And so my question is, was anyone then, or will anyone in the future be doing real trend analysis and trying to get ahead of the issues so it's preventive maintenance and not just reactionary?
Great question. Thank you very much. And do you do that by a train set, by individual car?
No, Jim raised a great point. most recently, the last few years, we've been jumping from crisis to crisis, and that's no way to manage something this large. And we need to do exactly what he's saying, is you got to fix it, and then you got to continue to maintain it, not just fix it once and then come back a few years later. It will be an ongoing effort that we have to do. But then we can start to do that, I think, in much more normal windows of maintenance.
Tina in Montgomery County. Tina, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm a regular rider of Metro and have been for several years. And one of the things that has frustrated me is that when one of the train operators is doing a really, really great job, there's no way that I have to let you know or to let him or her know that I really appreciate the service they're providing. Does Metro have any plans to put in some kind of an app so that people in individual cars in real time can be in touch with Metro or the operator to say, thanks, you're doing a great job?
Tina, great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. One thing you do right away is any car you're in, there's a number right on the door, on both doors. Just write that number down and where you are at the point. So if you're at Judiciary and you're on train, 4198, just write Judiciary 4198 and the time, and then we will know exactly who it is. Because I do that myself all the time. I'll hear somebody, and just the way that they're communicating to the customer, I make sure they know it as well. So that's one way to do it. A technology answer, I don't have one for you right now, but that's the easiest way to do it.
Everybody who grew up around here at a certain time, late 70s when the system opened, remembers how cool it was. I mean, the trains were cool, the stations were cool. They were unlike anything anybody had seen in mass transit before. And you get a little bit of that back when you step on one of the newer rail cars. Yeah, they look a little bit more like the New York subway with the hard floor, but it's spick and span and has that new train smell.
Yeah, but it's funny, Jeff. Growing up, and my wife went to GW, so we would spend a lot of time down there. To me, and when people would come from growing up in Baltimore, people would come from around the country, go to Washington. It was the mall. It was the monuments. And it was Metro. It was part of the experience, and it was. You took people for a ride on it, just to do it, almost. And we've lost that. We've lost the sense of pride in it, I think. And that's one of the large things I want to restore. And I think we got to restore it internally first. But I think as a region, there still is a lot of pride in the system and what it means to the region. And I think we want to try to rekindle that.
One of the sort of mind-boggling things about the new trains, if this is correct, I read that the 8-car train set of the new trains uses too much power, more than the third rail can safely provide. How could that have happened?
Well, I agree with that. It does provide it safely. It does require more power. That's what it does. Initiative.
Where's the power go? I mean, it's the same. Physics of moving a train and air conditioning.
It's a larger. I mean, that's why we don't have 8-car trains throughout the whole system.
Right.
Is we don't have enough power to in effect.
I mean, this isn't your fault.
No,
the thing was engineered in the 70s, and all the platforms are 8-car length.
Right.
You would think there would be enough power to run.
Well, there isn't. Yeah. And so that's the issue. And as they started to move towards 8-car trains a few years ago, it then requires the power as well. It may also, though, been the headways that you're running. So it's different to run 8-car trains, if you're running them,
every
5 minutes away, right? 5 minutes apart versus every 3. That's again different issues. But again, that's one. The plan, obviously, long-term plan is to get 8-car trains.
Personally, a year ago, probably the last time we talked, you were running BWI Marshall Airport to accolades. Now you are running it's a well-paying job running the Washington Metro system, but it's probably more headaches in a day than you had in a month at BWI. Are you glad you're there?
Oh, no, I love it. No, I love it. It's, again, the scale of it is a challenge, but the people, all the stakeholders are so behind this system, So when you see that, the people that I work with are excellent. I literally, I get stopped quite a bit by customers, and they get it. They know what we're trying to do, and they're very supportive, to the most part.
Well, if you see Paul on the Metro tomorrow, say hi. Pass along a compliment. Thank you for coming by. Really
Jeff. Nice
appreciate
seeing
it.
you again.
Thank you for joining us for Direct Connection. We're back Thursday with Your Money and Business. Have a good night.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.